I'm the ops director for a nonprofit, and I'm working with my ED on a grant proposal. She writes in the third person because she thinks it's more professional and authoritative. I tend to write in the first person to bring more warmth and build a personalized connection. Do you know if there's any gold standard for whether to use third person or first person in grant proposals?
I have never seen a gold standard on this, but I will say that in general, when you go through any kind of grant writing classes, they oftentimes recommend third person. There's sort of this sense of professionalism that I think people lean toward in the grant writing profession, but I'm gonna buck that trend, and I'm gonna tell you it depends. And so I think you are onto something, and I think your executive director is onto something. Basically, I look at a couple of different things. I go, if it's like a family foundation, or maybe it's a corporate foundation that I have a really good relationship with, or the organization does, someone we know, then I think more of that personalized first person touch just feels, to your point, it feels more warm. It just has a different feeling reading it, and that's what you want to convey. I think almost always, I've never seen a case where I would not, for like a government grant of any kind, I would absolutely use third person. It's just a different beast, and it's a lot more, there's less of that kind of touchy-feely nature of what you're dealing with. So that one I would absolutely do. And then the other thing I was going to say is just like thinking about how is the question asked? So like if you get a question that says like, what does the organization do about X, Y, and Z? Then like I would respond in the third person. If it was, what does your organization do about X, Y, Z? Then I would use the first. So I think all of this is to say, I don't believe there's like some like tried and true, you have to do it. I think it just, you kind of got to use the sense of, do you know them? Is this a government grant? If so, then we shouldn't even have this conversation. That's just third person. And right. And then the rest of it, you kind of like see how it's worded and kind of the sense you get from the funders. So that's straight from Stacey. So if I'm wrong, you can point people to me.
Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board.
Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing.
Nonprofit resources.
Welcome to Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where hosts Andy Shurick and Stacey Wedding answer your questions about all things nonprofit.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Everything. I'm Andy Shurick. I'm here with Stacey Wedding, and we're here to answer whatever random nonprofit questions you have. And we have some great ones this episode. It is so much fun. The ones that we have for the last ones that we just got are going to be so interesting. Sometimes I feel like we go on like they're little waves. Like sometimes they're like, I feel like we've talked about this a bunch of times, and then this last time they're great.
Yeah.
Like they're all new.
We got some unique ones and some doozies that we were like, oh my. Yeah.
Like I've never thought of this before. Great. Yeah. So keep sending them. We love it. We get, if you want to make Stacey and I happy, just send us weird questions. That's our favorite thing in the whole world.
We're officially nerds. So just
officially
in case you
nerds.
didn't already know that. We're nonprofit nerds. You know. Maybe that should have been the name. There's probably already something out there that says nonprofit nerds, but
we blew it on naming the podcast, didn't we? Oh well. That was a mistake we made 200 episodes ago. Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to jump in.
I am the CFO of a mid-sized nonprofit and have seen the impact of government funding cuts on our organization this past year. From what I'm reading and hearing, this will continue. Do you have any recommendations for how we can plan financially when everything feels so unstable?
Mm-hmm. It sucks, doesn't it?
It does suck. I hear this and it just hurts my heart. Ugh.
Yeah.
Because it's real. And Andy, you and I are hearing it.
Yeah. And it's everywhere too. And it's just getting worse. Like I was reading something earlier today that was that makes It's like a new rule that literally makes no sense. There's absolutely no reason that it needs to exist. And yet here it is. It's now part of the guidance. And now we need to figure out a way to either figure out a way to get around it or just not do government grants at all. I think those are the two options for some of these things. I'm sorry. I wish I had better news. However, the recommendation that I have been making, and I continue to make for any organization that's putting together some sort of budget or trying to figure out how we project, is to start with revenue. 100% of the time, always start with revenue. So I know this feels backwards, and I feel like we've talked about this a lot lately, but that's just because it's what everybody's worried about. But the way the process needs to go is you need to figure out how much money you have available to spend, what your mandate is from your strategic plan or from your program plan or what the board or the community expects you to do, and then figure out how those two things intersect. And the thing that falls out of that is the expenses. So expenses is last. But forecasting revenue is, we just need to be realistic about it and look and say, so here were the grants that we used to get. Looking at these, we have absolutely no intention of complying with the new rules that the federal government is putting on these grants. So we're not even going to apply for them. Or the grants that we used to get are no longer available to us because of whatever. And so we're probably not going to get them. The tool that I generally recommend to figure out revenue likelihood is you take the amount that you're asking for, multiply it by the likelihood that you're going to receive that amount, and then the product of those two things is what you put in your budget. So if you're asking for $100,000 and there's a 50% chance you're going to get that, you would put $50,000 in. And this works to the extent that you have enough things in the pipeline that you can go after and assign percentages to because of sort of the law of averages, and also because your development folks and your grant folks are really, really good at being able to look at something and say, I think I've got a 62% chance of getting this. And they're usually really close to being right. So you can rely on that kind of thing. And it comes up with a number that's more likely than not to be in the ballpark of where you ultimately end. So that's how I sort of do that. I think the second piece of that, and this is very unpopular, and I argue with boards about this all the time. Budgets are kind of a pain, and forecasting is a drag. And if we spent the amount of time that we spend on reforecasting, thinking about what's going to happen 5 years from now, trying to come up with numbers for something that may or may not happen 5 years from now, designing systems to be able to capture all the inputs to be able to come up with something that's even in the ballpark, is if we spent all of that time on actually doing our services or trying to find new sources of revenue, we wouldn't have to worry about this kind of stuff. But boards are very, very hyper fixated on, you gave me a budget number, now you have expended or brought in numbers and they don't exactly match the budget number because of course they don't. There's no possible way that they would. And so now we're going to spend a bunch of time talking about whether or not that number is higher or lower than what you projected. And you're going to make me come up with the reasons that it's higher or lower than it's projected. So I'm spending all this time just sort of justifying something that we shouldn't have wasted any time doing in the first place. It's just, I'm not saying don't do budgets. I'm saying let's think of budgets as this is our best guess, and we should have an intelligent conversation about how good we are at guessing, but shouldn't be the be all and end all of the planning process. Planning should involve much more important things than just did we meet the target. And I think part of it is because that's something that the board can feel like they can sink their teeth into.
Yes.
We give them a budget and then we report actuals and they're like, okay, here's two numbers. I can subtract. I've got something to do now, right?
That's so true.
Right? They get fixated on this one activity that they feel like they have some sort of control over. And so it just makes us spin our wheels worrying about this all the time. I will tell you, I lose this argument all the time. I mean, you could tell I feel strongly about it because I think it's true.
You do.
But I lose this argument all the time with like, why are we, we want to do a 5-year strategic plan and we do 5 years of projections to determine. I'm like, 5 years? Like, you might as well ask me to like go to Venus. Like, that's impossible. The numbers are going to be complete. We're orders of magnitude off by the time we get to 5 years. Have you ever looked at a 5-year? They're like, well, just every 6 months, you're going to do a little reforecast. I'm like, so I'm wasting my time making up things for 5.5 years from now? Like, don't you think my time could be better spent elsewhere? So if anybody has any ideas of how I can win that argument, I would love to hear them.
Good luck. Yeah, good luck with that. I'm also curious to know, I mean, I have several clients right now that are doing more scenario planning for budgets. And I don't know what you think about that strategy too, but thinking about, right, like the best case scenario of a situation like this, right? Okay, none of the government funding changes. That'd be best case, right? Half of it depletes, and then so like, what does that look like? If we think all other revenue is going to stay static or just like slight increases or however the projections are. And then like worst case. So almost so that you have comfort and a plan already. I know it's everyone's best guess, but like a plan in place, depending on how things, and I'm guessing boards don't, I've never seen a board approve 3 scenario budgets, but at least having that right in the back pocket. I don't know, like that feels like another strategy. What do you think?
I think I like the theory. I think if someone said, I want you to do 3 budgets, I think I would quit.
Okay. That's honest. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that just seems like, so I'm more on the side of we're all smart people. Let's have a conversation and let's make a decision that we can all agree on that says this is what we think is going to happen. Based on all of the information that we have, this is the most likely scenario, and then work on that. Because again, we can use, and I mean, maybe this is just because I'm a math person and I think physics eventually wins. If you say, here are 3 scenarios, the most likely scenario, this scenario has a 10% chance. So we got a 10% chance of getting $1 million. We've got a 40% chance of getting $500,000. And we've got a 50% chance of getting nothing. That I can multiply all those numbers together and come up with $375,000. And that's what I would budget. I would say, okay, based on the likelihood times what we're going to get, if I game that all out and just mash those all numbers together, I get a number that then is all of those decisions baked into this one final number. And as long as we've got it documented that we said that there's a 10% chance we're going to get $1 million. So if we get $1 million, great, that was fantastic. There's a 50% chance we get 0. Are you comfortable with me booking 375? So that's the right. And getting that kind of conversation about how it's built and what we're going to decide, and then being able to document that and then talk about, and then the questions aren't like, well, you said 375 and it came in at 275. Like, where'd that 100,000 go? Right. Well, I could tell you how we came up with the decision to decide on 375. And this is what the result was. What do you want me to tell you? So as long as we can sort of document those assumptions and there's a sort of a formal, legible, understandable way to say, this is how we came up with that decision. Then the question is, what do we need to do next time to make a better decision? Not why are you off by $100,000? Because that's just nonsense. Like, and you've seen those budget to actuals, right? And it's like got a line and then it's got a space for notes. And somebody said, Betsy died and she was our main contact. And since she died, we didn't know who the new contact was. So we lost this funding, or like whatever. Like, how does that help you make a better decision in the future? Like, okay, tell Betsy not to die. Mm-hmm. There's no information that you can feed back into the process that makes you better at it, which is, I think, what everybody wants.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, you make a really good point. I mean, the other thing going through my head with all this, some organizations are fortunate enough to have operating reserves. And while I know that is not, many organizations hopefully also have a reserve policy of when they can tap into it. But I also think in these uncertain times, thinking about not feeling scared because sometimes it takes a long runway. Andy, you and I both know this. Sometimes a revenue strategy or a new revenue strategy to replace your old strategy around government funding, that doesn't just happen overnight. And so you might need a year, right, where you're borrowing a bit from the reserves with the intention of putting it back as soon as you're able. But like having like moving it from one account, like moving it for operating capital. Like, I don't think that, I think some people get really scared to do it, and rightfully so, because you and I have also heard the nightmare stories of where someone keeps doing it every year. You take a little more out of the reserve and it doesn't get replenished, and then you're in a world of hurt. So obviously that's a whole other tracking thing that needs to happen. But I also go, gosh, why aren't we thinking about that strategically as well? And in these times that we're in, if the organization has the luxury of a reserve.
Yeah, I think some of those are short-term cash changes. So we can get a line of credit that'll help us smooth out the bumps. We can dip into a reserve if we happen to have that available to sort of smooth out short-term bumps. But when we're talking about, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just extra pessimistic lately, but I feel like federal funding is sort of permanently at risk at this point. Because if we have gotten to the point where whatever political party is in charge can arbitrarily change the rules and everybody has to sort of march in line with what that is, that means the rules are going to get yoinked around constantly every 4 years or every 2 years. And it's going to be impossible to plan for anything. So if I were working with an organization that was heavily federal grant dependent right now, I would be lobbying for, let's figure out a way to do this without relying on the federal government because they've proven to be an unreliable partner. Now, that then turns into a advocacy and lobbying question. I don't know if that would help, but it feels like these are not, the stresses that we're seeing right now don't feel like short-term problems to me. And maybe I'm just being extra pessimistic. Maybe I just watch too much TV or something, but it feels like this isn't something that can be handled with, let's dip into the reserve because things are going to get better in a couple of years. Because like you said, and like we've always said, is that one of the reasons that we focus on expenses so much is because they can be changed immediately. So if you're running out of money, you can just stop spending money. It's really easy. You can't ramp revenue at all. It takes a much longer time. There's always pre-planning. Like, let's say you want to do direct mail. Okay, cool. That money's going to be here in 5 years. Yeah. So that's the runway for each one of these. Let's just get another major donor. Oh, you're just going to like knock on somebody's door and put your hand out. They're not going to give you money. You need to build a relationship first. And that's going to take a long time. So reserves are great, but I feel like right now we're just depleting reserves with no, like, what's the plan to get the reserve back up?
Yeah, I think where I'm going with it, and I probably wasn't clear on it, is not because I think it is a short-term strategy and kind of a quick fix. I think I'm thinking about it with a longer, like if I'm an organization and I go, because of all the things you like, all the reasons you just said, Andy, and like what I know out there, and I'm like, we have been heavily, like our organization has been built on this government funding model and federal dollars. And we are going to need to figure out an entirely new model and revenue model and strategy because we weren't diversified enough before, or fill in the blank. Because that's going to take the time, to me, that feels like an operating reserve, borrowing it under that is it's different than like, just let's fix this quick, fix, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Like it's more of a, and so I feel like that is intentional and planful and thoughtful. I do think I get nervous about the people who are just like desperate. I got to find cash anywhere, right? Like that's not going to be that's going to just, I don't know, like that's a really bad pattern to get into. But yeah. How do we, and I also think from a capacity building standpoint, there are some funders, and there's the bright side of this is I'm also hearing more private funders, particularly in different parts of the country and different kinds of foundations, but that understand the realities of what's going on out there right now. And so some of them are being more open to operating or unrestricted than they have before. Now, that's not in every community and that's not every funder, but some are really stepping up for the times that everyone's in, but also so like figuring out and exploring some of those, but also looking at maybe you ask for a capacity and build like capacity investment from a funder to build up that revenue model. Like you said, like we're going to figure out how we get the expertise or like have the investment in figuring out how to start generating revenue in a new way. And it's going to take a long runway to get there. But a funder that does capacity building, like as a funder, funders love it because they're like, cool, I'm helping you diversify revenue. I mean, not all funders, right? But like, I'm helping you diversify revenue. I'm talking more like private funders, private foundations, family foundations, right? Not corporate. I mean, corporate foundations, that's not typically the way they think about it or do it. Obviously not anything to do with government, but like a private family foundation, like business-minded people would be all over that. So like that could be a strategy too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. So like if you're driving a car and there's a pothole ahead, you might slow down to go through the pothole. But if there's a canyon, you're going to have to build a bridge first. Yeah. There's no speed at which a canyon is safe. Yeah. So yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense too. And it's nice that you're seeing foundations that are willing to start talking about unrestricted funds that can be used for capacity building instead of just program. You guys figure the rest of it out, which has never been helpful.
We started a branch of our nonprofit that goes and takes care of a specific service for local events and festivals. It aligns with our mission and the community is excited about it. At first, we were staffing these events with volunteers, but as you might guess, we ran into issues with volunteers not showing and not having volunteers in general. We looked into it and we learned that independent contractors can make up to $600 a year without having to file a 1099. So we started paying people to be there instead of just relying on them to volunteer for free. We don't have any employees within our organization, so this felt like a simple solution to avoid going through the process of setting up payroll for many people working a few hours over the course of a summer. I understand this is a loophole, but I'm worried that I'm technically doing something wrong. So, is this technically okay?
It's technically not okay, unfortunately.
Shucks.
Unfortunately for you, I think you're onto something when you're like, I think this is a loophole. And then you ask yourself, well, is it really a loophole or am I pretending it's a loophole? So and this is going to get worse, not better, because that $600 just went like for next year, it goes up. Like the number gets higher than $600. So, and we'll link in the show notes to where you can find, if you're feeling masochistic, the official IRS documentation on all of this 1099 stuff, because it's not just nonprofits that are trying to save money by not paying payroll taxes on employees. It's every horrible business. So the key that you need to remember when you see the words independent contractor is the word independent. So that's the definition of that thing relies on the meaning of the word independent, which means that you are not telling them what to do in any way, shape, or form. You may have a contract agreement with them for them to provide some sort of service for you, but you do not get to direct their work. You do not get to tell them when to show up. You do not get to tell them when to go home. You do not get to tell them you're done with your hours. We need you to go home now. Like all of those things that you are probably doing when you're directing the work of these former volunteers is now something that they're supposed to do all on their own. And the IRS goes after, they used to go after folks all the time for disobeying the independent contractor rules, because it really looks like, oh yeah, if I don't pay you very much, and you're only just working a little bit, like then I don't have to actually do any of the payroll tax. Like you said, the payroll tax, I don't have to set you up in the payroll system, which is expensive and has ongoing costs. It goes on and on and on and on. So unless it's, and I can think of other ways to potentially like get around that. So there are temporary staffing services that manage that process for you that you maybe you poke around and see if you can find somebody friendly that has a temporary staffing service that can do some of that work for you in exchange for, I don't know, their name on a building or something. You can come up with some way to be able to make this happen, probably if you're creative about it. But unfortunately, just hiring people, not paying them very much and calling it a 1099 is like the biggest red flag for the IRS to go after you for a payroll tax audit, which you don't want to do. It's going to cost you way more than the payroll costs to deal with that payroll tax audit.
So Andy, I'm sitting here just desperately trying to think of other workarounds, kind of like what you said with the temporary staffing, but like, are there other things this person could do? Like, could there be like maybe it's not a monetary stipend, but could there be like gift cards given, like a gift card given to, am I complicating this? Yes. If all of you could see Andy's face right now. Oh gosh, no, that doesn't make it more complicated. It just makes it just that much more illegal because now you're intentionally understanding that what you're doing. So one of the ways, so interesting thing about like, if you're ever sued in tax court, like you can literally say, and it's a legitimate defense, I didn't know, right? That's true. That's true. Someone will actually give you the benefit in a tax court. You can get the benefit of the doubt occasionally with like, I had no idea that was a thing, right? Like there's no other area of law where that's possible. Like you can't, like, you get pulled over on the highway and the cop's like, you're going 75 and a 45. And you're like, I didn't know. And he's like, that's too bad. Right. That's the only, like, that's not going to work there. For some reason in tax law, I don't know, seems to be a better defense than in other places. But not here. So what you've done is like said, okay, I understand that doing it this way is wrong, but what if I do it a little bit differently? Like, so yeah, no, you can't pay with people with gift cards. Sorry to the listener. I was just trying desperately to figure out. Andy's cracking up. I was like, come on, there's got to be some kind of loophole workaround because hear you. I hear the pain of this, right? And maybe it goes back to, okay, like, I don't want to be naive because the reality is volunteers can be a blessing and also a curse, right? There is, because of the unreliability, but, you know, is there a way to explain to volunteers the impact of them not being there? Like, is there a way to, you know, understanding emergencies come up just like they do with like staff, just like they do with independent contractors, just like they do with anybody, right? Emergencies come up. But I guess I also go, is there a way to, with the volunteers, sometimes the people understanding the impact of them not being there, it is sometimes something that I feel like puts, for people who are wired a certain way and responsible. I also think sometimes you see volunteers where perhaps it's, or, you know, what if it were like, hey, you could get 20 interns, Andy, 20 interns that are getting college credit and they could help with this. That would work, wouldn't it? Anyway, I'm just joking.
Well, yeah, but yes, because they're still volunteers.
They're still volunteers. So
this turns into so the real answer for this, honestly, I think, is if the job sucks and nobody wants to do it, which is why the volunteers aren't showing up. It's like, it's boring, it's hot, the bathrooms are far away, like whatever the reason, the volunteers, like, because think about the threshold, like just for you, just the human person, if somebody says, hey, do you want to go do this thing and volunteer? Like, even if you're the nicest person in the world, there's something inside your brain that goes, nah, I don't know. That I don't want to get up early or whatever it is. Like, you know, I was planning on sleeping in on Tuesday or whatever it was. So I don't necessarily want to do that. So you have to kind of make it worth their while. And if their passion for the mission isn't enough to get them to sort of do something for you for free, then yeah, you need to either pay them or you need to come up with some way to make it less of a drag. So this is just a volunteer program design question, which is, so it's at a community. It sounds like local events and festivals. So maybe you do some work to figure out, can we get free entry into the event for their families? Can we get other people to donate food tickets so that they can come to the event, but then after they've done their 2-hour shift, they get to go enjoy it with like some free corn dogs or fried Oreos or whatever. Like whatever if there's something that you can do that makes it worth their while, because paying a person to be there with gift cards or money is one thing, but providing them lunch, giving them something that was donated to you is a perfectly legitimate volunteer expense for the nonprofit. And it isn't specifically giving them something that's cash. So again, there's no employee relationship. You can't get mad at them if they don't show up. So it becomes a harder job of you trying to figure out what are we going to do to be able to entice these people to do this. So if it's not the mission that's going to do it, you need to come up with some other way to get volunteers to come do this, or you're going to have to actually pay people in real life some other way.
All right, everybody, you made it through another episode of Nonprofit Everything. We're so glad you were here with us. And as you know, each episode, what makes it happen and makes the magic happen are your questions. So, you can find Andy and I just about anywhere. You can go to nonprofiteverything.com and click the Ask a Question button. You can email questions@nonprofiteverything.com. We have all sorts of ways you can track us down with whatever's on your mind. And, I've even had people before, Andy, for whatever it's worth, people who know me who have reached out and actually left me a voice note with their question because, they were out jogging or whatever they were doing, right? They were driving. And so feel free to whatever way you can track us down, do it. Send us your question and it will be in an upcoming episode. And again, thank you for joining us today.